So good morning. We've already got a lot of folks here on a Saturday morning early. They decided to do the discipline thing. I put out that discipline message on the reminder this week. And, there's always this concept of discipline is doing what most won't to be prepared when most are not. And it's not just to finish there. It's to be able to do and act and function and perform when it matters most. So just being able to have the discipline so you can do something that no one else does, that's arrogance to me, my opinion. Look at me, I can run faster, I can do more pull-ups, I can do more push-ups, I can put more plates on the squat rack at the gym. Okay, cool, great. But to me, we always get back to what's our most valuable thing that we talk about here at Better Each Day. The most important thing is the gravestone. The most important thing is your big why. So if you're doing something and your why is what? Just so I can put more plates on the squat rack to show that, my quads are stronger than yours. Really? I mean, didn't we get past that in 6th grade, or I don't know, maybe it was 12th grade. We were still playing varsity squad. We're still trying to do, who can max out the squat rack on the Smith. Really? But do you really see individuals evolving in the next level of their maturity? Yes or no? What do you think? Do you see that maturity out there in the world? Or do you see people still acting in the same?
No, we don't. We don't see a lot of it. We see it's very rare to see people really going out there and being disciplined.
Right. So you don't see the discipline, or you don't see them acting for what I would call more mature levels of a bigger why. When you're in high school and you're doing all those things in high school, it's what? It's to, get on the starting squad, catch the playoff touchdown and win, the playoff, to shoot the buzzer shot if you play basketball, or to hit the home run and bring everything around the bases if you're baseball, or what? To get a scholarship, maybe if you're academic. But, you would think that as we grow older, that we're supposed to mature. True? That's what we're supposed to do, right? Adults are supposed to act more like adults and less like children. But then when you look at how people function from a peer standpoint, what do you think? Do they impress you or do they disappoint?
Disappoint.
A lot of kids out there.
I'm sorry?
Most of the time.
Okay. A lot of disappointment. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? I'll tell you how I deal with it, but I want you to tell me, how do you deal with the disappointment? Linda, hang on. I got to get you to turn on your volume here. Hang on. I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Let's see. It's showing me that your volume is on, but I still can't hear you. There's Bob. Bob, good to see you this morning as well. Hang on, Linda's working with audio difficulty. Okay, so what we're asking a question about is, how do you deal with people's immaturity in your world? How do you?
I think I've decided to not have high expectations and just have the expectations for myself.
Okay, good point, Nisa. Okay, so Nisa's saying, okay, we got to reduce our expectations. Okay, that's a good strategy. David, what do you got?
In Seward, with all the tourists, like this weekend, there's going to be 30,000 people. So I decided to go to my parents' house.
Sure.
COVID's starting to ramp up and I don't want to be in big crowds, but I find when there's more people, people start to degrade in their manners and everything. And that's big with me. And I had a situation where people are just being rude and, just in the grocery store and just like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I've got to be the bigger person here because I know a lot of these people are not. And so instead of getting upset, I'm just like, you know what? It's not worth it. I have to be the bigger person. Right. And just make that decision and be like, they're not going to do it. I have to lead by example because they're not going to.
Right. So when you're saying this lead by example, when you come back to that level, really where you're going, David, is also kind of ties in with what Nisa's talking about. If we don't learn how to manage our own level of frustration, David, what you're talking about there, 30,000 people, tourists, kind of rambling around like bulls in a china cabinet, right? So, you know, they don't really have, they're there to get what they can get as fast as they can get and jump back on the plane and they're out. So they're not there to take care of the city or the surroundings or whatever. Most of the time, tourists don't have a lot of respect or reverence, deference for an area that they come to. That's been my opinion as well.
It's everyone for themselves, and
Yeah.
it's a selfish mentality. Yeah.
So when you're dealing with that, you know, going back to Nisa's perspective, you know, we lower our expectation because I'm in agreement with her. And David, I'm the same way. You know, I came out of this environment where decorum, military level Marine decorum, was the baseline. Okay. So you had a certain level of deference, of conduct, of respect, of manners, if we want to call it from the South,
Yeah.
right? And believe me, there was no such thing when I was performing in an environment. I never knew when my dad was going to be Overwatch, where he was actually checking to see if I was performing and conducting as I was trained. So I was always on call, if you will, or always on. So there was no such thing about your mannerisms or not helping someone cross over a street, opening a door for a lady, maybe helping out smaller little ones that might be lost, for instance, in a store. You don't just disregard that and go, somebody else will help the screaming kid. You know, you step up and do your job and protect the kid, because who knows who the other, quote, adult that might step up to try to help them could be someone that's not really there to help them. So you always have to be training to be able to step forward and do what? To be the leader. And so the expectation of someone else is supposed to do the right thing is not how we function and create a better world. We train every day. The reason why you're here right now and not a lot of other people aren't, because thousands of people got an invitation, and we've got, I think, 6 folks online, maybe 7, with my friend RK over in India. So we got 7 folks online, and it could be 70, could be 700. But that many people, when they know what your agenda is, when they know it's about discipline, when they know it's about doing those things that are routine. See, what's his name that calls him daily habits guy? Darren Hardy. It's about doing those things and taking responsibility. Where your life is right now and the caliber of your life is a result of what? The result of the decisions you have made in the past. Every single decision you've made, little and small, has a consequence. And you are living the consequence of the decisions you have made. And you're like, whoa, hold on here, Steve. Hang on. I don't like that, because I'm not responsible for, maybe my life isn't in the perfect place that I would hope it would be. And so I want to say that other people are responsible. Other people got in the way. Pandemic got in the way. Economy got in the way, blah, blah, blah. And you start coming up with all these things to blame and do what? And complain about. So with that in mind, because I know that's a common perspective, and I know people that are already on a mission to strive and become better, it's hard to step up and go, I have to take responsibility for all the bad stuff too, even though I'm the one that's constantly training. I'm the one that's constantly on Impact Theory with Tom Bellew show, training with him. I think I sent all of you the link that I was on a couple of days ago, and it was up early, and it was a 90-minute training program. It was longer than I had, but I did it. And I was tired when I did it, but I did it. Why? Because I wanted to be that better version, because when I get an opportunity to step in front of you, my obligation to you is to not be the same person that I was last Saturday when I was on here. So that's why this has been part of my training this week. Okay. So with this in mind, Nisa's idea of let's reduce the expectations of other people so that we're not what? Constantly aggravated and frustrated. I will tell you that this little secret that Nisa shared with you was a big paradigm shift for me about 20 years ago. Because of the high level of expectation that I was trained to operate within, with the no excuse environment by my dad. And that environment allowed or caused me to project that onto everyone else. So guess what that meant? I expected everybody else in my environments in the public to act with Marine level military decorum. And what kind of frustration level do you think I walked around in that world? Yeah, I
Very
was out of my gourd. Okay. I mean, I was literally ready to take people
Blood in
out
your hair.
because I saw the common level of disrespect, of zero decorum, no thought, no planning. You know, the willy-nilly term that I hate, because that was a term we were not allowed to function under. But you see people living their life, no purpose, no mission, no idea that there's other people in this world, and I need to manage my operation so that not only am I maintaining everything that I'm supposed to be doing as a citizen of the society, but I also want to function in a way that sets a standard that leads from the front, not from the rear. And so when you're doing that, and then you see these other people that just have no clue. I mean, literally, they run their life like they pull the pin on the grenade and they're just sitting there with the spoon popped, waiting for it to blow up. And they wonder why their life is a disaster. And I'm like, put the pin back in the grenade, okay? No, that's not how you live your life, just pulling grenade pins and going, woo, let's see what happens next. But you have so much
seminal moment.
Go ahead,
when
David.
did you? I call it a seminal moment where you have that off. I call it a seminal moment. It's a hospital term when your head pops up and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what was that crowning moment where you decided, what am I doing? How do I shift? What was there one thing, or just over time, it just kept getting beat down by people's lack of performance?
It was, I don't know if I remember the actual date, but I remember it was roughly 20 years ago. And I was at this extreme level. And I was so frustrated. Okay. This is an older version of Steve. So I was so frustrated in the environment that I was in. There was just so many people that were, I just felt, if I'll use a word, imbecile. Okay. They were derelicts. Okay. And there was another couple guys there that were prior active military. So I said something to them. I said, you know, really the thing we need to do for society right now is to make sure none of these other individuals that are walking around here, you know, continue to take up space. There was an old T-shirt that I had back in the 80s by a company called No Fear. It said, if you're not standing on the edge, you're taking up too much damn space. And these individuals were the opposite of that. These were the individuals that were what I call the entitlement mentality. All for me, none for everybody else, very selfish, zero interest in caring for anyone else, and certainly not leaders. They were getters, I call it. Give me everything I deserve and more. And part of yours, even though I didn't earn it, I didn't sacrifice for it, I didn't struggle for it, I didn't learn anything for it, I just am due. And they have this weird thing. So anyway, David, the thing that the point that I got to was a point of, I felt like I was just going to explode. I was so aggravated, and my life was living with such a level of pain and frustration. I just looked at a friend of mine that he was a Zen master. Okay, a good friend of mine, brother. I will call him that. He was that close. And I said, I'm living with this level of frustration. I feel like I'm just going to come out of my skin. And he said, but why are you doing this to yourself? I said, I'm not doing this to myself. All these people around here, all these people, they're not trained. They're not functioning. They're running around like a live pin pulled out of a grenade. And they wonder why their life looks like this devastated chaos. Okay. And he said, but you are doing that to you. And my best friend, his name was Doug. I said, Doug, stop playing philosophy. Because he was a Buddhist monk. Okay. That's what he was, a Zen master. I've been studying for years and years and years. And he and I used to train together, work out together. We even fought against each other in martial arts. And I was like, look, we're going to go right now. If you don't stop telling me that it's my fault, you and I are going to fight right now. And he goes, why are you wanting to fight me? Are you that upset with me telling you this great truth? And I said, look, stop being a Zen priest. Okay. Stop all this stuff. You know, you're aggravating me, and you and I are going to have a problem. He said, no, really. The reason why you and I are having a problem right now is because you have a problem. And all I'm doing is put a mirror in front of you. And you don't like what the mirror looks like. Live with it. You fix it. You're smart enough. You're strong enough. You say you want to make a difference in the world. Why don't you start with a difference in you? And when he said that, I was like, I am going to punch you dead into the dirt. Okay. But what he was doing, why was I so frustrated? He kept putting the mirror up in front of me. He kept putting the mirror up in front of me. Look at you. You're the reason for your frustration. It's your standard that you are what? I'm projecting my standard onto all these other people and demanding, judging them, and demanding that they live to the standard that I was trained to live by. Wow. And as soon as it hit me, it was like that epiphany, David, that you're talking about. It was like a lightning bolt struck me. I said, wait a second. And so he asked a question. He said, if all of these people that you are so frustrated with, if you changed your perspective and you no longer held them at the level of accountability as an adult, and you reduced what Nisa's saying, I lowered my expectation and I saw them all as 13-year-old teenagers. And when I did that, I asked myself the question, would I be upset at the caliber of their conduct if they were all 13-year-old teenagers? And my answer was, of course not, because they're a teenager. They still haven't been trained yet. They haven't been through the training process that you mature through. And all of a sudden, everything instantly changed because I changed this. And I decided, wait a second, that's really what these individuals are. Just because their physical chronology looks like they are an adult, I was judging them and demanding that they operated with my level of training. And yet I thought, wait a minute, how many people grew up with a dad like me, where I went to boot camp, Marine boot camp for 17 years growing up. And so I was holding everybody at the standard way up here. And everybody was performing down here. So I was constantly upset and frustrated, pissed off. And then all of a sudden, when I said, wait a second, they haven't been trained. No one has cared about them like my dad cared about me. The teachers that I was lucky to have when I was in high school that actually cared about the grade, my GPA, maybe they went to schools where no one cared and just passed them through. Just get out of my life. And so they have this feeling that no one cares about them. So their reaction to no one caring and showing them love and respect is, I'm do everything. I want everything. And so they're sitting around with their hand out, expecting the world to finally change it, instead of me with my perspective saying, you've got to go earn it and you don't deserve it until you earn it. So instantly, when I change my perspective, now, do I still flash back? Do I still go back because of the training in me? Yes, absolutely. We don't ever get to this point of, oh, we made it, and now we're a Zen priest or a sage or a guru or a monk or whatever, and all of a sudden we get to keep it. It's a daily struggle. To me, it feels like everything I'm going back up. But once we've had a breakthrough, guess what? Then we can always go back to that breakthrough and go, oh, how did I get to that point where all of a sudden all this anguish and frustration and agony that I was living, it was my creation, because I was demanding that everybody lived here when they were functioning down here. And when I just said, wait a second, let me just, not so much that I was taking them off their obligation, but I was seeing them at the level that was probably more just and right, because no one had put them through the training. No one had put them to, and told them that they're supposed to live to a higher caliber, that you're supposed to be a leader leading from the front, meaning that means you train harder, you train longer, you train more, and you constantly up your level of performance. Why? Because that's how everyone else that is seeing you as the leader. Stop doing this. Stop using this to tell people how they should live. Use your life to show people how you should live. You be the standard. Live by example. Push yourself harder. Open more doors. Create better relationships. Learn how to deal with obstacles. And in doing so, the standard that you set by your conduct speaks 10x over anything that you can come out of your mouth, sharing someone your philosophy. Live your philosophy. That's why I love this picture that you see back here. Live the story you want to tell. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point of that picture frame back there. Live the story. You be the example. Don't tell people how to live. You live. You move your standard up. Let your example be so extraordinary that, who was that saying that taught me that? I think it was Kierkegaard. Live your life at such an example that if everyone needed a baseline to live by, they would choose you as the standard. Wow. Whoa. Think about that, okay? Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, wicked philosopher. Live your life in such a way that if someone needed to have the standard for all mankind, they would choose you in your life as the standard for everyone to follow. Wow, that puts yourself at a different level. So I'm giving you all this because this is what inspired me this week, okay? Reading Matt's book that he gave me actually 2 Christmases ago. So I'm going to share with you, we've got a few minutes here. I'm just going to stay on this Better Each Day right now. So we're not going to break here in 5 minutes. I want you to watch this quick TED Talk by Jocko Willink. He's a U.S. Navy SEAL officer, actually fought in some of the most difficult environments during the Iraqi war at the Ramadi environment. So if you've seen American Sniper, how many have seen that? American Sniper?
No, I haven't.
Okay, fantastic movie. Okay, who's the actor in American Sniper? Fantastic actor. Okay, so this is the most decorated U.S. sniper in the history of U.S. military, more sniper kills than anybody else in U.S. military history. And I am I'm upset that I'm blanking right now because he was in SEAL Team 3. And I'm glancing through the inside here to see if I could see his name. And I apologize. I'm sorry. I was looking through here to see if I could see that. I'm not finding it, but I know he was SEAL Team 3, and I could see the guy. He's a great actor that actually played the role. Very realistic. Let me let you watch Jocko, and this is 13 minutes, so hang with me. I'm going to switch over here, share this with you. And be sure to take notes because we'll talk about it right when we're done.
Is it Bradley Cooper?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
War is a nightmare. War is awful. It is indifferent and devastating and evil. War is hell. But war is also an incredible teacher, a brutal teacher. And it teaches you lessons that you will not forget. In war, you are forced to see humanity at its absolute worst. And you are also blessed to see humanity in its most glorious moments. War teaches you about sorrow and loss and pain. And it teaches you about the preciousness and the fragility of human life. And in that fragility, war teaches you about death. But war also teaches you about brotherhood and honor and humility and leadership. And unfortunately, war teaches you the most when things go wrong. And for me, one of the most impactful lessons that I learned from war was in the spring of 2006 in the city of Ramadi, Iraq, which at the time was the epicenter of the insurgency, where brutal and determined terrorists ruled the streets with torture and rape and murder. And it was in one neighborhood of that city, during an operation that I was in charge of, when all hell broke loose. We had multiple units out on the battlefield fighting the enemy. We had friendly Iraqi soldiers, We had US Army soldiers and US Marines, along with small elements of my SEAL team. And then the fog of war rolled in with its confusion and chaos and mayhem, and with its gunfire and enemy attacks and screaming men and blood and death. And in that fog of war, through a series of mistakes and human error and poor judgment and Murphy's Law and just plain bad luck, a horrendous firefight broke out. But this firefight, it wasn't between us and the enemy. This firefight, tragically, was between us and us. Friendly forces against friendly forces. Fratricide. The mortal sin of combat. And the most horrific part of war. And when it was over, and the fog of war lifted, one friendly Iraqi soldier was dead, 2 more were wounded, one of my men was wounded, the rest of my SEALs were badly shaken. And it was only through a miracle that no one else was killed. And it was reported up the chain of command what had happened. That we had fought and wounded and killed each other. And when we got back to base, things didn't get much better. There was a message waiting for me from my commanding officer. And it said, shut down all operations. It said that the commanding officer, the master chief, and the investigating officer were inbound to my location. And they told me to prepare a debrief to explain exactly what had happened on the operation and what had gone wrong. Now, I knew what this meant. It meant that somebody had to pay. It meant that somebody had to be held accountable. It meant that somebody had to get fired for what had happened. So, I began to prepare my debrief. And in it, I detailed every mistake that was made and who made it. And I pointed out every failure in the planning and the preparation and the execution in the operation. And I pointed out who was responsible for that failure. There was plenty of blame to go around. There were so many people that I could incriminate with guilt. But something wasn't right. For some reason, I just couldn't put my finger on who was at fault and who specifically I should blame for what had happened. And I sat and I went over it again and again, and I struggled for an answer. And then, when I was about 10 minutes from starting the debrief, that answer came, and it hit me like a slap in the face. And I realized that there was only one person to blame for the confusion, only one person to blame for the wounded men, and only one person to blame for the dead Iraqi soldier. And I knew exactly who that person was. And with that knowledge, I walked into the debriefing room with my commanding officer, and the master chief and the investigating officer were sitting there waiting for me, along with the rest of my men, including my SEAL that had been wounded, who was sitting in the back of the room with his head and his face all bandaged up. And I stood up before them and I asked them one simple question. Whose fault was this? One of my SEALs raised his hand and he said it was my fault. I didn't keep control of the Iraqi soldiers I was with, and they left their designated sector, and that was the root of all these problems. And I said, no, it wasn't your fault. And then another SEAL raised his hand and said it was my fault. I didn't pass our location over the radio fast enough so no one knew what building we were in, and that's what caused all this confusion. It was my fault. And I said, no, it wasn't your fault either. And then another SEAL raised his hand and he said, boss, this was my fault. I didn't properly identify my target, and I shot and killed that friendly Iraqi soldier. This was my fault. And I said, no, this wasn't your fault either. And it wasn't yours or yours or yours, I said as I pointed to the rest of the SEALs in the room. And then I told them that there was only one person at fault for what had happened. There was only one person to blame. And that person was me. I am the commander. I am the senior man on the battlefield, and I am responsible for everything that happens. Everything. And then I went on to explain to them some new tactics, techniques, and procedures that we were going to implement to ensure that this kind of travesty never happened again. And I will tell you something, it hurt. It hurt my ego. It hurt my pride to take the blame. But I also knew that to maintain my integrity as a leader and as a man, I had to take responsibility. And in order to do that, I had to control my ego so that my ego did not control me. And you know what? I didn't get fired. In fact, my commanding officer, who had expected excuses and finger pointing, when I took responsibility, when I took ownership, he now trusted me even more. And my men, they didn't lose respect for me. Instead, they realized that I would never shirk responsibility. And I would never pass that heavy burden of command down the chain and onto them.
Okay, let everybody turn yourself off mute. We've got about 2 more minutes. I'll put the full program here of Jocko in the replay. But I'd like for, until we run out of time here, we've got a 40-minute limit on this call. The most important thing that he talked about right here,
Extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership. Until we learn to stop blaming and complaining about the poor level of performance of other people that have not taken their life by the horns and chosen to upgrade their performance level by training, learning, and expecting more performance out of this person, not everyone else. You're going to live in a life of agony, like I was explaining before, that I lived 20 years ago, and I still battle it today. Extreme ownership is taking responsibility for every single thing in your life. Everything. Everything. If your relationships aren't the level they're at, it's your fault. If your relationships with your children aren't what you want them to be, it's your fault. If your income isn't what it should be, it's your fault, my fault. If your business excellence doesn't stand at a level that causes other people to want to strive harder, it's our fault. If our level of making ourselves better in order to make the world better doesn't set the standard, it's because we're not pushing ourselves at a level that causes the recognition of what we decided to do with our discipline. We have to own every single thing in our life. And only when you own it can you make a change and alter it to become better. When you blame, you pass that responsibility on to other people that are not the same level of caliber. They do not have the same level of desire to make the world better. So the world isn't going to become better because they're not going to pick up the baton. We have to pick up the baton, and we pick it up by hanging on to it. It's our responsibility. So we can stop the blame. We can stop the agony of what other people should do, why they didn't do it, and who's to blame, and what politicians, and what Washington didn't do or didn't do, and all these other things. It's our responsibility, each of us, to prepare better, to perform when everyone else expects us to just give up. Does everybody understand that? Did everybody get that from Jocko?
Yes.
Okay. So we got 2 minutes left. Comments. What did you pick up?
Well, I picked up that it's important to take responsibility if you are the leader, especially when things go wrong. It's more important when things go wrong to take responsibility. And also that there might have been a combination of things that made was contributed to what went wrong, but you have more integrity and respect if you take the responsibility.
Bingo. And if you add this to your reading list, okay,
Yeah.
the value of taking extreme ownership is, as you saw within his command when he stepped in there to that room, is other SEALs in the room started stepping up to take responsibility for their own areas that they were responsible for. And that is the key thing. When one leader takes ultimate extreme ownership, you create a hierarchical esprit de corps. It becomes in part so that each person within the ranks, within a family, within a business, everyone starts taking responsibility for their area of responsibility. So instead of everyone shirking the responsibility because the leader shirks ownership, the leader takes the ownership, extreme ownership, and then everyone else falls in line and functions. And that's how you make change. It's amazing. It is the secret. As soon as I read this, and obviously Jocko with his real-time experience, that's the secret. You have to take responsibility. I have